Today, we are really pleased. This is part of the advanced topics. We are talking about our series on person-centered planning that we've been doing all year. And today we have a special on working with children and adults. So how person-centered planning is important and works for both children and adults. We are enormously pleased that we have Alexa and Kathy Brill, who you can see on your screen. We'll do introductions in a few moments, who will be the core presenters and have had tremendous experience working with families and younger families and children. So we're really, really pleased. I'm going to just hold on for a moment. We're getting a number of additional people come in as they join us. So let's just do a little background while we begin. A few housekeeping things for anybody who isn't familiar with Zoom. Probably everybody in the world is by now, but up on the right-hand side is a view, a little text view. And if you click on that, it toggles through different views that sometimes people prefer when the PowerPoints are up. In addition, we have closed captioning, and you have to enable that. So if you want to see that, you have to click on the live transcript down at the bottom of your screen. Anybody who might not know, if you roll your cursor down to the bottom, a menu will pop up and you can see that. You can turn that on and off. We also want to promote that. All of you are, almost all of you are working leaders and working with other people, and modeling behavior with closed captioning can really enhance not only accessibility, but many people that have more limited literacy. The text can help people. We have live translation with Sam DeVoy, who is a United Nations certified translator and is actually in Ecuador and was with us today through the wonders of Zoom, the upside that we have. You also have to turn that on, and down at the bottom either says interpretation or where it says more, you click on that and turn to the Spanish, and that is seamless interpretation working there. We want to ask everybody to be on camera. This helps us get to know you to see us. It helps us to do better training, and we appreciate people being on camera so that we can have a little more interaction with everybody. The training sponsored by the Nebraska Council of Developmental Disabilities and also the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, which a number of you are part of. And this is really part of bringing about person-centered planning goal to Nebraska and reinvigorating it. In many ways, it's been here for a long time, but recentering people, reinvigorating, reinitiating. And it's also part of the what really was Obamacare, which requires that there be a person-centered plan for every waiver participant starting next year. At the end of this, we'll do a survey, and we'll be appreciative if you fill that out, and we'll share that with you. We want to share our team. It takes a village. There's almost 6 or 7 of us all involved in this. Jennifer James is one of our co-trainers you've seen in other sessions, and is just a participant today. David Weatherow did the last advanced topics on circle support, and there's a recording of his session. He's doing tech support, and Ann Formeller and Mary Angus are helping with the chat box and with the getting everybody into breakout rooms that we're doing. So with that, we want to turn this over and give as much time as we can to both Kathy Brill, who is the former director Parent to Parent of the United States, of also Pennsylvania, was on the TASH board, has been active in person-centered planning and in disability services for decades. Was also the winner of the National Council on Disabilities for leadership in 2016, and has been a special ed teacher for long before that. And Kathy is her daughter, who we're going to very, very pleased that she's able to be with us today. We weren't sure she was going to be able to, but she is, and she is going to share some of her experiences. And we're actually going to see her house in a just awesome video that we have later to show. With that, Kathy, you're on. Thank you very much for coming.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. And this turned out to be a really pleasant surprise because initially I was going to be presenting from my home office, which ended up having a lot of issues with technology. And of course, Alexa's a whiz with technology, and she happened to be available to join me today. So we get to do it right here at her house, which is perfect because she was going to be a lot of the focus of the presentation. So I'm really thrilled to be able to present with her. So I'm Kathy Brill, and I'm mom, and it's been a really long road, and it doesn't end. I can tell all of you who are parents out there and the professionals that work with parents, It really doesn't end. And so therefore, this is like wonderful, wonderful session to be focusing on person-centered planning with children and families. One of the passions that I've always had from the very beginning is how do we get families to start thinking about this from day one. And as you'll hear from Alexa, you'll understand how differently she thinks because she doesn't know any other way to think. So now I'm going to give an opportunity for Alexa to introduce herself before we get started.
Hi, I'm Alexa Bell. I live in Camp Hill, and I work for the Arc of Pennsylvania near Harrisburg as a social media and website manager.
So in addition, though, if I may add more, in addition to her work as a social media manager for the Arc of Pennsylvania, she also is the new president of SAU1, which is Self Advocates United as One. So I'm very proud of her for that as well. She's done an awful lot of accomplishments over the years. And we're going to get started on the next slide, Mark, which is the definition, similarities, differences, and what else. And the reason this slide is here is because there's so much confusion. I hear from families like, what is person-centered planning? My goodness, they're just starting to get up and figure out what this new life is all about. And then these things come at them that they hear about, but they think, oh, that's something I couldn't possibly understand yet. I'm still trying to learn the ropes for the things that I have to do right now. And I just want all the families that are listening to this right now and the professionals that work with them to understand that it's merely person-centered planning is a way to help us think out of the box. It's a way to help us think about things that we might not be used to thinking of. There are a lot of similarities in regardless of the age that you are working on a person-centered plan, such as nothing about us without us. That's a term that we all know. It needs to be the focus on the child, of course, the child's future, Alexa's future, not my future, not my husband's future, not her siblings' future, but her future. She has a future just like our other two children and just like we do. But there has to be a way in which families can also focus on their child who has a disability at the same time as doing all the other things. Now, what are some of the differences? Well, those same similarities can also be differences depending upon your family. Families are so unique, and we have to keep that in mind. Families, not just, and I don't just mean the typical cultural diversity and language differences, but our personalities, the way in which we think. Do we think the same? Of course we don't. Some of us are creative types. Some of us are very much into, you tell us exactly what to do and we can do it. And we're very focused on perhaps like accountant types. My one daughter is just like that. She's very much an accountant type. My other daughter is one where like, woo, let's do anything and everything all at the same time. Alexa is in the middle. She's very level-headed, but yet she's also very creative. But because of those differences in our thinking styles is the reason why we need to learn person-centered planning. It's a way for us to understand the various personalities that might be involved in either our own families or our friends, neighbors, blah, 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 and of course, the professionals. And when I say what else, I basically need you to know that it's not a one or nothing. It's not a person-centered plan. Oh, it's done. I created a plan. It's much broader than that. And we need to think about that from day one, from the time our children are born. We can't think that we're just going to put a plan together and that's going to be it. We need to learn that these plans mean something. They are there for a purpose. They are there to help us think what's next and how to make that happen. because
Yeah,
one thing
it constantly evolves.
is
It'll change over time. Like it won't be set in stone.
it does. It changes overnight and sometimes just plain old constantly. It might just be a constant. And so, and the people change that you work with, the professionals change, attitudes from parents change, everything changes. And because of that, it's very important that we learn how to work with that, go with the flow, so to speak. But because some people do think differently about all these things, having that plan and learning how to think out of the box and with all these different styles really helps to solidify how we are going to move forward. Did I miss anything with that?
No.
Okay, next slide, Mark. So this is just a slide that I put together a long time ago to help explain things specifically for early intervention, but it was just at that time for early intervention. It's really something that works for everyone. And the reason for this is with young families, especially, we can't think very far sometimes. Sometimes we're so focused because we have all these new people and we're not used to all this. We're not used to having therapists on our doorstep. Maybe at, while at the same time we're trying to think about how to do dinner. And oh yes, that's right, I have to take my other child to Girl Scouts tonight. Oh right, we're having this weekend. We're not used to all that. And sometimes our children who have disabilities can get thrown out of the way. And this is a danger point. It's an absolute danger point that families face. And so this chart helps us to keep in mind that the child and our whole family, we have bigger things to think about. We've got grandparents and relatives, friends and peers, neighbors, parents, siblings, the child themselves, their interests, activities, environments, attitudes. All those things, if you can figure out where are those things and which things are the most meaningful. I'm just going to give you one example is, I'll give you a bigger example first. We lose a lot of friends. When our children are born with a disability, all of a sudden our friends, unfortunately, don't know what to do, what to say. We lose them and they find it safer to just leave, but we get new friends. We get a lot of new friends that are better friends. And all of a sudden we realize that, but it's an influx thing that happens. Grandparents might not be so comfortable anymore because their house is inaccessible and all of a sudden you need accessibility. Neighbors, what happens now? So this helps you to focus on the changes that might be happening within your world and the things that are meaningful, and then to select those choices. What are the things that are most meaningful? What are the obstacles? How can you overcome those obstacles? It's just a place to help you clear your thoughts and not to expect perfection. Once you start to choose your choices and figure out the obstacles, then you can go step by step, which we'll learn a little bit more of later. But since this is advanced person-centered planning, I'm hoping that you at least have a little bit of a grip of that part. And if you don't, if after this session is over, one of the things that Alexa and I decided is that you can email us. I can send our emails to Mark. He can send them out to everyone. And if you have additional questions or you want to discuss any of these afterwards, we'd be more than happy to do that with you, a Zoom call or whatever you'd like. So the things to think about are also toys, assistive technology. Assistive technology is changing. We were talking about that a little bit before we started this meeting, is changing like, by the minute. And there are so many things that aren't being given the focus that they should be for a lot of reasons. A lot of reasons they start out expensive, then they become cheaper. But sometimes it just takes that extra person to be able to help us find the correct assistive technology, how to get it to work. Toys can become accessible using assistive technology. all sorts of things. Communication device is number one, which I know Alexa is going to probably mention it because it's a pet peeve of hers when she sees any of her friends or other people who have disabilities without a communication device, and then people are yelling at them because they're talking out of turn or what, making noises and they're trying to communicate, and people don't realize that. It's a real pet peeve of our entire family to see anyone without a communication device when there are so many that are out there. So, or do you want to have anything else you want to add to this?
Not that I can think of right now.
Okay, we can go to the next one. And this is where Alexa is going to start her pieces. And if I may jump in, if I feel like it, can I do the same back to you?
Yeah.
Cool.
As my mom will tell you, when I was born, I was very determined from the beginning. I was 3 months early and really small, but she tells me that from the very beginning, she saw that I was determined, and then for a little while, I was very frustrated, according to her, and I would cry all the time. And the therapist that she took me to was like, baby, she's frustrated because she can't move around. So the way I remember it is, I remember very clearly her taking me to this store full of wheelchairs, and she let me pick out my color of my power chair and the power chair I wanted. And then we went home, and I was spending around in circles. That's all I could do. And my dad, he comes home, and he was thinking to himself that it wasn't gonna work because he just couldn't see it. But my mom and the therapist were smiling because my mom always believed that I would figure it out, and she took me to these malls and these open spaces where I would learn how to move straight. And I'm not perfect at it. I run it come off to this day, but she never let me worry about it. Neither of my parents made a big deal out of it. They were like, it's okay, it's just so off. And then in elementary school, I went.
May I interrupt here? I want to just add to that, because that was such an important part of her life.
Yeah.
And a professional helped us to figure this out. And this is the beauty of the parent-professional relationship. And so often, as time goes on, a distrust evolves, unfortunately. But if we learn to work together and we truly have in mind the best for our child, it's amazing what we can have, what we can discover. Because if it weren't for that one occupational therapist who said to us, you know, I think this is why, like Alexa said, I think this is why she's crying so much, because she cried for like 3 years straight.
Yeah.
And at night, all day long, but she was born, you know, like she said, 3 months premature. So we were just trying to figure out what in the world is going on. Yes, she does have, they did diagnose her then with cerebral palsy at a certain point, but some people were saying, well, maybe she's having pain. Let's just do more therapy. One of these therapists said, I think she's crying because she's frustrated. She needs to be able to do things on her own. And sure enough, it was that parent-professional relationship that got her to try a power wheelchair. And even though, like she said, my husband thought it was the funniest thing in the world, he thought, there's no way this is going to work.
He never said that, never once, until I got this point that we figured out like he didn't have any internal doubts because he never said anything, because he wanted to be really supportive of all of us.
And that is one thing that I have a slide of a little later, but since she brought it up now, I'll mention it now. It was bizarre to me to find out just a few years ago that my husband did not believe in any one of these things that we were doing, because we were taking on some huge challenges for Alexa and making sure that we would break down those barriers so that she could, you know, get more comfortable with the world the way she should be. This is her world, just like anybody else's world. It's a civil right. We're going to make sure these things happen. And all this time, whenever we'd mention something that we should do, he'd think to himself, oh, well, he'd say out loud, oh, okay, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And he'd support us 100%, but never once did he believe it would ever happen. And he only told us this a couple of years ago. Well, actually, he didn't even tell us. I saw a file folder on his computer that said something, I forget what it said on the outside.
It said, that will never work.
That will never
And
work.
he was writing stories just for the fun of it about his experiences of what it was like when my mom would have an idea for me, and he internally in his head was like, this isn't gonna work, but he never once said that because he wanted to be really supportive.
And that's something that everybody needs to keep in mind. We have doubts, and all of our feelings and our what we think is we're capable of are all based upon our experiences. And if our experience shows that, oh well, a little girl who has not been able to walk up until this point, she's not going to be able to use the power wheelchair. These things sometimes are in our brains and we don't realize how wrong we are. We're so wrong. And that's why my husband started writing these stories, because he was wrong. He was wrong on every one of them. And thank goodness. And he even said this, he says this all the time. He said, if it weren't for being married to me, and I had a little bit of experience before this, you know, working as a teacher, taking on the administration. But if it weren't for being married to me, he would have said, no, we're not going to do this. And he would have gone the safe route, and he would have had her in segregated settings with a push chair, all these things, because he thought that that was the right answer. He wasn't being mean. He wasn't thinking that he doesn't want to, you know, try to problem solve for Alexa. He truly, truly believed that these things could never be problem solved and brought to reality. So he has a series of like 10 stories of things that that Alexa now does beautifully, right up until using or having her own home.
And we'll get to that later. But then when I was in the elementary school, I had some anxiety, like everyone else does. And so the guidance counselor at my elementary school, like I said, I was fully included, mainstreamed in the classroom for like the whole thing. So when my guidance counselor said she had a friend named Nancy who happened to use a power chair because she had polio, she thought it was a nice idea because she thought my anxiety was coming from the fact that maybe I needed to talk to someone who went through some of the same things and had the same experiences. And if the slide switches, you'll actually see a picture of her, but she would take me to like City Island, much to my mom's horror at first, because she wasn't used to that. But then she was like, hey, wait a minute, listen to what we want. And then if you switch the slide,
Do you want to switch now?
yeah,
Mark, will you switch?
I ended up,
Did you want to do the other one first or just stick with this one?
I'll stick with this one. I ended up on an ice hockey team because these neighbors that we had, they moved in from Pittsburgh and they were really hardcore hockey people. So they were always trying to get my sister Lauren into hockey. And of course, she played other sports too growing up. And I was supportive, but I was always just watching. And I always felt a little left out. So we were talking on Gina's steps the one time outside her front door, and she was like, well, you could be the statistician. And if you knew anything about me at the time, I found that extremely funny because that was my worst subject. So she ended up rigging the spreadsheet or whatever you do, so the formulas would calculate the numbers for like the totals for me. So all I had to do after each game was get the score sheet from the coach and enter the numbers in the spreadsheet. And then I was on the news for it. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
Do you want to tell them about your stick, your hockey stick?
oh yeah, this hockey stick right here, it was an idea of my dad because he happened to be a principal at the technical school, so he was always having his students do projects for me. And so originally what my sister Lauren did, she's always very creative. And I was sitting in the driveway watching them play street hockey. And I was like, I wish I could play. And she's like, well, here you go. And she takes like this big bully stick and gets some duct tape and totally just duct tapes it to the side of my arm.
They duct taped the whole thing fast. A regular stick. Well, Lauren bought you the hockey stick for Christmas or for your birthday, and then duct taped it fast to your chair. Is that how it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was having fun out there with everyone, but then my dad realized what was going on, so he came up with this idea to have them cut the top of the stick off, and then I have an attachment here for like my cup holder, you'll see, and there's these pins that it would drop down on, so he made like an attachment for the stick to attach. And then I just ended up playing street hockey with the rest of them because I had these attachments, and it really helped me being on the team because it made me realize that my anxieties were I'm sure lots of people my age have the same anxiety. So that really helped me build confidence. And then I decided to go to college.
Let me add
Oh,
about the hockey first.
yeah.
So this is another important thing about person-centered planning. If you think when you're doing the problem solving and you're thinking about the what ifs, how can you problem solve something, which we're going to be doing that during our breakout. We're going to be figuring out how to problem solve. But this is another thing, that taking advantage of your community. So like she had said, her dad was the principal of the VOTEC, of the county VOTEC. And he said to them, he took the hockey stick into them so that we wouldn't have to continuously watch them duct tape her hockey stick back, and showed them her wheelchair and showed that it was a permobile adjustment or whatever you call that at the side. And so therefore the students, these are VOTEC students who are each in different classes. He'd often present a project to the classes and just hand it off to them, to their teacher of that class, who in turn would have each of these students who has this great interest in a certain focus area of the VOTEC. And they'd sit there and they go, and they'd think, and they'd problem solve. And they came up with this idea. So her hockey stick here, they bent it with heat. They put this pivoting thing on it. And now she can go out on the ice. She was going out on the ice all the time, before and after each of the games, and on the breaks, you know, with when the hockey team was there. Not only was she was the statistician, but she also got to be on the ice with the team also. And because of this ice activity that she discovered that she loved, she was out there every Friday night at what was it called? Friday skate.
Twin Ponds, it was the public skate.
And so she'd be able to go out there and do that. And because you think that there are barriers to that, you think, oh, well, they're not going to let a child out on the ice using a wheelchair. And sure enough, the people that owned the rink, they watched her like a hawk. But I did my homework ahead of time, which is another one of the problem solving things, because I figured somebody's going to say, no, you have to get off the ice.
And you had me keep a copy of my ADA life in my backpack in case I got stopped by the guards, literally.
So she had a copy of the ADA guidelines from the ADA centers printed out and in her backpack, highlighted with the pertinent areas showing that she should be allowed to be on the ice. And it never became an issue. As a matter of fact, talk about changing attitudes. The owner of the ice rink, who initially had an issue and had everybody watching her, called her up one day and said, Alexa, would you please be on my ad? The news crew is going to come and do an ad for the rink, and I want you to be the focus of it. And he said, I'm so tired of everybody thinking of all the little things that aren't really important. They call me if the light bulb is out. They call me if this is off, that is off. And he said, but these are the things that are important. Watching you out there with your friends, playing the whip on the ice, and watching all the camaraderie that occurs. And so those attitudes will change as time goes on. Then that man that is the owner of the rink, all of a sudden his experiences changed. They are no longer the single-minded thing that would think that this is a bad thing. He got to experience it, and it was a positive experience. And now he understands more. And so his attitudes will change for the next time, as will all those people who came to participate in Friday night's activities on the ice. Okay, did you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah. And then I also did lots of advocacy. I still do. You pay for when I think it's in the top corner where when I was 6 years old, I was like really tight because I didn't have any baclofen or anything. It's a medicine that helps with my spasticity so I can drive my chair and move it. But so, those cameras from the 90s had lots of flashes. So when my sister and I went at the beach with my grandparents, and I didn't want to go because I would miss my parents too much. My mom ended up taking me to this event. I forget what it was for.
I forget too, it was like an opening, it was to advertise an opening of some organization and she was Governor Ridge's date.
Yeah.
So the upper left corner is where she has been the date of Governor Ridge.
And anyway, I would get startled by all the camera flashes, and the people that know me know that my left hand just does whatever it wants. It has a visual mind of its own. And so I wasn't even aware of the fact that left hand over here was totally whacking the governor every time all the cameras would go off. So he thought I was trying to get his attention, and on the other hand, I was wondering why he kept looking at me all the time, because I completely wasn't aware that my hand was hitting him. And so, like we said, my mom would take me to all these positive events with all these positive people that were really happy. And so that led me to the mindset of, okay, I do have anxiety, but all these people with disabilities are really, really happy. So I genuinely
And strong.
Yeah, genuinely thought that people with disabilities have this gene in them that naturally made them really happy. And that lasted until college. I'm not even kidding you.
Let me talk about
College.
this one a little bit
Yeah.
before you go on with that. And she's true. And I had no clue about that. She just told me about that a couple of years ago. She always thought, because of the anxiety, but see, her anxiety, that's genetic. I have anxiety. I mean, like, we're like hyper people, and it's just a gene. My mother was like that. And it goes back. So that's an innate thing. But she was internalizing this anxiety. And but she'd meet. And I think it's an extremely important thing for families to learn, and for professionals to help families to pay for going to these events. So many families get let out of going to these events because they don't have the funding. They don't know where they're at. They don't know how to get there. But if they could be given some support by the professionals to attend rallies, to attend conferences. She's been to the TASH conferences. I want to get her to one of the SABE conferences. And she's been to the SIL conferences always with and doing the rallies and the walks to the Capitol. But I try to give her as many of those experiences as possible to let her understand the need for advocacy. We have to advocate on our own. We can't just allow everybody to make these decisions for us. These are very important things to support the ADA, to support 504, to support IDEA. But she really believed that there was a gene that was in people who have disabilities that made them strong and happy.
Because you see, that's what during that entire time did I ever meet a person with a disability that was extremely happy and have this I can do it attitude. And so when I went to college, this girl was so unhappy because in my head I was going, you have a disability, which is a total gift from God. You should be really happy to be created this way. And I just didn't understand it. And that was all the way up until that point.
And the interesting part is when she went to college, she helped a lot of students. She was very confused, not only by this girl, but by a lot of the students that were there that didn't know how to do the problem solving. And she helped them. She helped them, go to the disability office. You got to go every single day. You have to let them know you need this scanned, and she just stay on top of it all. And these are all things that we problem solve.
Because unbeknownst to my parents, I was watching them the entire time growing up and how they would problem solve. And my dad always likes to call it the clean and sweet, where you go to the person and you always politely remind them over and over again of what you need until you get it. So every day I would walk across campus to the disability office every year because they would scan your books for you. Back then they had to break the binding and put the books in this huge scanner and then scan it onto a flash drive so that I could read it on the computer. And like every day I would go over there and ask them if my books were ready, because that's what I learned at the transition conferences. They won't do it for you. You have to tell them what you need, and you have to be very persistent.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just constantly following my parents' example. They were floored by what I was doing, but I didn't get why they were so impressed, because it's like, what, this is what you taught me to do, so I'm doing it.
And then there are two things that I just want to put out there from my perspective that I thought were very important with what she just said. And one of them is when she was talking about the girl who was negative. We had a grant through Pennsylvania TASH. We had a DD Council grant at the time, and we tried to find out from students, young adults, what they wish their children had, or what they wish their parents had done differently for them as children. And so I interviewed this girl whom I became to know very well. And she said, I really wish, and I wrote it down here, I really wish that my parents had forced me into the real world so I would be comfortable with it. That's a very, very important point. And again, why I think we need to start this at early intervention level and not wait till adulthood, to start really focusing in on these things. And the other thing I wanted to mention is a woman that we met recently who discovered Alexa, I think, online, and wanted to know how it is that she has her own home. And she was so curious about her. It was a mother, how she was so curious because her son was in a segregated school his whole life, but he was very similar to Alexa. They had the same support needs, but he was in a segregated school, a specialized school the whole time. And now he's out in the world and he wanted to volunteer and he didn't know how to. They didn't know how to problem solve him finding even a place for him to be able to volunteer. So Alexa invited him over to her home. He and the whole family and another group that was friends with them came over, and they got to see all the accessible features. And we got to talk about his needs and how to break those down, how to problem solve those. And she was just like in awe. And she just said, I wish that we had met you sooner. And not meaning us in particular, but that's what she said. but she never had someone who had problem solved these things that was just like her son. She was always being told that her son couldn't do this. Her son couldn't do this. He didn't even have a communication device because he was told that he either had to learn how to use a power wheelchair or learn how to use a communication device. They didn't have time for both. So a lot of these things slip through the cracks if we don't keep our focus on them. And they are all things that if you start at birth, they become just like such a natural thing that it's just a way of life.
Yes, and my mom would get that negative advice too, don't get us wrong, but she never followed it.
I never listened to
Never
that.
went,
Never.
never went, because if I can go back in time a second again, she was the special education teacher
Oh, dear.
who never had students in her room where they were expected to be, because she was busy working on IEPs for them to be included in the regular.
Well, she loves to tell this story, but it's true. It's a true story, but she loves to tell this story where I probably gained some of my experience prior to it. It was just that I didn't, when I was a special ed teacher, I figured out how to get my kids included in classes. So the administrators would walk by my class and discover that I didn't have students in my class because I figured out how to get them all included in the regular classes. So I was sitting there making accommodations the whole time for them in the regular classes. And at that time, we're going back, you were born in '89. So it was before that time. You know, this was still a pretty new thing, but it used to irk me to no end that that my students did not need to be in my class. I knew how to get them into a regular class, and I truly believe everyone should. We should go into your video, honey. Now we're gonna pause for time.
And this is my house video coming up. It's a little outdated because the technology has changed, but it's basically the same point.
Thank you. Isn't that a great show? And like Alexa had just said prior to the video, is it's going to be redone. People are talking about redoing it because she has some updates that she'd like to put in into the video because they're now cheaper. They're now off the shelf, as if like we spoke about before this session even began. And they're sometimes even more, they help to be more independent. They help with your independence a little bit more than we had expected. So as all these things change, we're going to be changing the video, and I'm sure we'll get it out to you when that's complete. So we're going to catch up with time a little bit now. And to set the goals with the child, I was able to catch up with some of the chats at the side while we were showing the video. And I totally agree with what some of you had mentioned, is like, wouldn't it be great if professionals would come into the home and actually see the child in the home? And that is so true. And we did have that done also with Alexa, coming in and seeing what her interests were. But look for emotions, look for expressions. If they don't have the verbal skills to be able to tell you exactly, or they just don't know exactly because of anxiety or whatever, you can always really watch the interest level, the happiness. Is it boring? Does it appear boring? Is it sadness? Is it excitement? And then talk to other family members and peers who know them personally. Create the plan, but again, don't get stuck in following it perfectly, because things can change on a daily basis. Next slide. And this, unfortunately, is what oftentimes happens. We all know this. A child doesn't fit the norm, so the system evaluates them. The child gets identified and labeled. The supports are based upon a siloed system of availability. By siloed, I'm pretty sure everyone that's on this call right now knows what siloed means, but just in case you don't, and I'm not faulting the agencies for being siloed or organizations for being siloed, because even parent advocacy organizations, regular advocacy organizations, even they oftentimes have a tendency to become siloed towards their own mission and don't seem to realize that it's necessary to collaborate among each other so that you can really get the full breadth and depth of the possibilities that exist. If you get each of the agencies and the advocacy groups and the families and the individuals to all work together, imagine the possibilities. If one over here says, oh, I have something that would work, and over here says, really, I didn't know about that. Well, can we? So that type of collaboration, coalition building, is so incredibly important in communities. And I really do hope that you do it. I'm assuming that since we have this person-centered planning sessions happening here in Nebraska, you probably already do a lot of that. But just to mention, that's something that's always been a pet peeve of mine, is that people try to stay so focused on their mission, their own mission, that they forget all that their area of expertise is capable of doing if they worked with others. And if the service, support, or activity that is requested has never been done before, what then? Oftentimes somebody says, nope, we can't do it. Nope, we can't do it. But in essence, you can do it if you learn to work together and you learn to really create the steps, which we're going to do in our breakout. Really figure out, what is it that is the barrier? What is it that you can do to break that down and to do each step separately? Who can help you with those steps? All of those things can be done. And so if that doesn't happen, unfortunately, the activities, the environments, etc., end up becoming very limited. Do you turn the page, please? Slide. And not to get overwhelmed, but there is a time when, when you have a child, a young child, sometimes you feel that you need to stay in the day-to-day because it just is too overwhelming to learn everything all at once. But it is also equally important to constantly keep in mind about the future. If I stayed focused completely on Alexa and my stress level, and my husband's and our other kids and their needs, if I stayed just focused on that, I guarantee you she wouldn't be where she is today. So it's important to constantly think about these things and have the parent-professional relationships. Once we get those relationships going and they get and these coalitions going, imagine what we can all accomplish together. So think about what about next year? What about 5 years from now? What about 10 years from now as an adult? Think about your vision, your thoughts and ideas. One of the things when I would take Alexa to the advocacy conferences, one of the things that she learned upon meeting all the self-advocates was she can indeed live on her own, as much as other people thought not a chance, because she didn't want roommates. She said, I don't want roommates yet. She's got 2 extra bedrooms, does not want roommates. But she learned from her friend Ray. I don't know how many of you know Ray. He's a really strong advocate, self-advocate, but sometimes his attendant care didn't show up. And of course, right now, this is serving her beautifully because we're in a real attendant care crisis. Very much. She's down to like 50% of her attendant care. But one of the things that she does once in a while is she just tips herself back. If somebody doesn't show up for the evening shift, she'll, instead of calling us, hey, can you pick me up? Can I come over to your house and sleep? She'll just tip herself back in the chair because we discussed this. We discussed this previously. Well, and I have a slide on this later to play devil's advocate. What's the worst thing that can happen to you? The very worst thing. Well, Ray woke up the next morning. He was perfectly fine. Yeah, he was probably hungry, but he's still alive. Somebody else is going to come to help him soon. And she learned that, and she was perfectly comfortable with that. Once you thought through what's the worst thing that can happen, can you survive it? Sure, I can. And it's just something that a strategy and a tactic and a part of the education that needs to happen. Next slide, please. And Alexa already went over most of this, so this one we can probably skip. But there were so many things that he didn't believe could happen, of course, between the power wheelchair, computer mouse, the school bus, which is what you're going to be doing the activity on, college, house, and amusement rides. She actually was the guinea pig for changing amusement rides to have adaptations on the kiddie rides so that kids who have disabilities would be able to ride them at King's Dominion. So there are a lot of things that could happen that he didn't believe in. And as I mentioned, the school bus, we're going to be doing a 10-minute breakout for this, after which time we'll then do a regular break and then do part 2 of it as soon as we come back. The 2 breakouts are related to each other. This one I selected because I think it's the most difficult one that our family faced. It had a lot of moving parts to it and a lot of naysayers, which we didn't think were going to happen in the beginning. It was a very long process. So the question to you is, or what I'm posing to you as the breakout room activity, is a family requests a public school district add a wheelchair lift to the regular size school bus so their kindergarten age child who uses a power wheelchair can ride to school with her sister and neighborhood friends. The school district has never done this before and currently subcontracts to provide transportation using segregated, separate, small size busing for all children who have an IEP. And I'm sure this is very familiar with all of you. I mean, the scenario of separate transportation. Now, what I want you to do is figure out in small groups, what potential problems might you foresee happening when the family makes the request to the school? And after we're done with both parts, we're going to talk about the problem, more of the problem solving, because it's extremely important to have these problem solving skills under your belt at the same time as having a person-centered plan. They all go hand in hand. Okay, Mark, are you going to be doing the breakout room? Oh,
this is Mary. I'm going to open them up as soon as you say.
Okay, you can open them up now.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. We'll give people a minute just to bring ourselves back together again. Thank you very much. And for that wonderful South American music, we really appreciate it. It just helps all of us just to chill out for a moment and relax and just bring ourselves kind of back to a state of comfort and quiet. So thank you for that. So with that, we have everybody back. We're going to begin our session, and Kathy and Alexa, you're on. We're going to be doing the breakout rooms, and Kathy, you're on.
Okay, now, what we're going to do first is talk about some of the things that we discovered when we went about this whole session with making this request, after which you're going to go right into part 2 then for another 10 minutes. And that question is going to be, how might you problem solve these concerns? You can either choose those that you've created in your round 1, or you can choose some of those that I'm going to mention where our actual barriers that we faced. But first of all, I wanted to say I sat very quietly in the back of the boardroom where they had the meeting, where they were voting and they were turning it down. And this is after I had already been told by the superintendent, because I worked for a whole year, the correct way in trying to get them to put the lift on the bus. And then all of a sudden a political thing entered the arena, whereas the superintendent, who said, sure, we will do it. And then the school board said, wait a minute, we didn't even hear about this. How can you be doing this? You're opening up a can of worms for the nearby school district. So that's what it was. The nearby school districts called first. Their superintendents called our superintendent and said, do you know what you're doing to us? Our families are going to have this expectation of us as well. Superintendent decided he doesn't want that on his shoulders. He said, well, we'll let it up to the school board. The school board, having not heard about it before, said, no, we don't know anything about this. And so that's when all the trouble really started at the school board level, because they felt very uninformed. So some of the things that we were hearing then from the school district was the biggest thing, the cost. School districts are always looking at costs. So we had to face that. They were saying it's going to cost too much. Now, I'm not going to tell you any of the solutions, because these are some of the things that you get to do in part 2 to see if you can try to figure out, like I said, either the ones that you've already created or pick out any of these and see if you can actually brainstorm them down to a solution level. Fewer kids will be able to be on the bus, so more bus runs are needed. The school bus stop will be longer, preventing traffic from moving for longer. Therefore, we're going to have traffic issues out there. We are going to need to reroute the buses. We're opening up a can of worms. We can't have all these special needs kids throwing up all over our buses, is what was said during the verbatim during the board meeting. We will need trained bus drivers for the wheelchair tie downs. Driver won't be able to watch other students when tending to Alexa's tie down. And of course, the politics enters it. A child might feel anxieties outside their comfort zone, talking about the other students that are there. Students might get bossy, so to speak, with Alexa, and get ugly and bully and stuff. So, which, by the way, I'll tell you already, that never happened, with the exception of one parent who was really the bully, which you might not even know about. But anyways, so those are the things pretty much in a nutshell that we faced. But in the beginning, I didn't say a thing at the school board meeting. I was very, very quiet, sat in the back and wrote down, listened intently to everything that they were saying, listened to every naysayer, the reasons for it all, and then went home and cried, walked in the house, cried, and then started doing my work, getting all of my ducks in order and figuring out how I'm going to get this to happen. So now we're going to go right into part 2. And this is where you are going to see if you can pick some of these concerns, either the ones you've already provided or these new ones that I've mentioned if they're not on your list, and just see if you can figure out how you might go about problem solving these, or choose all of them if you feel that you've already got a pretty good idea of how you're going to be able to do that. And then we're going to come back together again in 10 minutes. It's 11:30, so we'll be back at 11:40. Thank you. All right, we're going to get started on this. So we're first going to talk about how we went about doing the problem solving of this activity. So the first thing, these are merely things that you can follow. Not everybody needs to follow all of these things. So I'm going to basically talk to you about all the things, like I had mentioned, that we faced as obstacles that were said to us. And this is how we went about making it happen. So I told you I sat in the back of the room, listened intently. One of the main things that people can do to each other is listen. Just listen before you start to plan what you're going to say. I could have kicked myself into a negative area had I started to argue back with them, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to argue back because I thought it was already a done deal. Alexa was waiting to get on the bus that never showed up because of all of this stuff happening, and we wanted to start with first grade. And so when all of this happened and I listened and I wrote them down the left side of a page and organized nice big packets. Remember, we're talking about the 90s at this time, but nice big packets for them of all the information. I wanted to show them that that we were thorough. We did our homework. We researched everything. We built, like number 1 says, we built our argument in case. Why do we want this? Why should they do this? So my rationale for doing this was at the top, kind of like a mission statement, including the fact that not only is this a cost-effective way, which we discovered, but it's also the right thing to do. And not only is it covered by ADA and IDEA, but it's the right thing to do. And so that was our rationale at the top. But then we had to let them know that they can't argue back with us because we already figured out the answer to that. So anything that was devil's advocate, which is in a future slide, we started to think about and added that to the list. So all the data that was researched was from the school bus company. So I had to call the school bus company that did the contracts with the school district. I had to find out how much they charged for the little yellow bus versus the big bus. How much would it cost for each student who was not able to ride the big bus, and therefore they had to use another bus, because I believe it took 3 or 4 seats. Big seats need to be removed in order to put a wheelchair lift on. So therefore that's that many more students. I believe it was 11 by their count that would not be able to be on that bus. So gathering all that information and making sure that they knew who I was speaking to, because that's important also. You don't want people to think, oh, well, they're just making this stuff up. This is their opinion. It's not my opinion. These are things I gathered from the contact person at the school, at the bus company, the contact person at the schools, and that included the transportation director, the assistant superintendent, and I don't even know how many others, but I made sure I listed all of those to let them know that I meant business. This is not something to be taken lightly. It's business that we have an expectation and we're not going to give up. And so then we had to, and I already said we listened to all the reasons mentioned. We generated the solution. So on the left side, wherever they said an objection, and on the right side, we wrote the answer. If it pertained to like the costs, we had a whole complete tab in the back that listed the whole budget, which we got from people and then figured out. And it turns out, did you know, by the way, that to run separate transportation is indeed more expensive than it is to put lifts on regular school buses and just put fewer students on the bus. There's quite a cost savings, and the school board was even shocked to find this out. Even other superintendents that I then interviewed later that didn't have anything to do with this, but I got curious for a study I was doing, they even said immediately, well, we wouldn't do that because of the cost. And I said, well, what if I told you this? So a lot of these things can be, that can come to light, that nobody even has an idea. They just have it, they have an assumption that this is the answer, and it's not. So we also called the Department of Justice. I spoke with a person from the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. I met with the transportation expert from Washington, D.C., got all of their information to make sure that, and I know they always say, and not to, what's that called when you name drop, don't name drop, but I'll tell you what, name dropping has its place. Because I did name drop. I said, I talked to the DOJ and here's all the information. I got the email, printed out the email, put it there to let them know that these are all things that have been explored, including the ADA, what's underlined on the ADA that pertains to school bus. IDEA and ADA overlap when it comes to school bus transportation, which I didn't know, but I found it out from an attorney who specializes in this, underlined that on his email and tabbed it all out. So you have a beautifully organized packet there that I'm pretty sure it answered every single question that they already had, plus every question that they could possibly think of to come back on that with. And sure enough, it was approved then 7-9, which to this day, Alexa can't figure out why 2 people voted against her going on the regular bus. But nonetheless, it was approved, and then the news crews showed up at our house at what, 7 a.m. to take pictures, and it was on TV and everything like that. And so then attitudes change once again. All of a sudden, it's the breakdown of barriers. People get to see it's the breakdown of barriers, and they get to think differently about disabilities. And this is her life, who she would have been stuck on a little yellow bus the whole time had we not gone for this, as much as it aged me terribly to do this. But now it's part of her expectation of herself and her friends and other people who come along behind her, who also want to have a meaningful life, and one that they can come up with their own decisions as to where they want to live, what they want to do with the rest of their life. Let's move on to the next slide. And this, I had to make this myself because I couldn't figure out how to get a regular slide in here. So I just redrew something that I had that is very important to me. Sometimes we forget that we need to do all the vision, the strategy, and the tactics together. Sometimes people are very good at creating visions, and then they think, okay, now it's going to happen, until you come up with the very first person who says, nope, not going to do that for you. And then you're like, what? And so it's very important that you think of the 3 things together: the why, the vision, the what, creating your strategies, and the how. What are the tactics you're going to do? And it's that centerpiece that's going to make the success for you. If you only do 2 of the pieces and not all 3, you always are going to have that possibility of it not being successful. But if you do all 3 together, that centerpiece will make it a success, and just stick with it. Next slide, please. Comfort zones is another thing that's extremely important. We get set in our comfort zones, all of us do. But what we need to do is really help people to get out of their comfort zones. So like if your child, as an example, going on the bus maybe for the first time might be, or on a little bus, might have a comfort zone of a little bus. But if you push outside of that, and all of a sudden they're on the regular bus, and it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. And I use that as a poor example probably, but anything like that, if you've not had the experience and you're in a comfort zone, Like families are oftentimes told, well, you know, I see you just have so much stress on your plate. We can help you out. We're going to put Johnny in this other class where Johnny's going to feel going to get so much more attention, and you can relax a little bit. And all of a sudden families get into a comfort zone. The child gets in a comfort zone. The professionals get in a comfort zone because the teachers of the regular classrooms don't feel the need to have to make accommodations for a student who has a disability, and they become real barriers. So we have to help each other to get out of that comfort zone and to grow. Next slide, please. And like I mentioned before, playing devil's advocate, overcoming your fears. That's the only way that we can really do it, is to overcome our fears. Is if we really think about what's the worst thing that can happen. And Alexa hates to talk about this because she's tired of hearing me say, face your fears. What's the worst thing that can happen? She says she has too creative of a mind, and she can see some of the things that could happen that she really doesn't like. But I keep thinking, what's the worst thing that can happen? If you can handle that, like we talked about, you know, Ray having to sleep in his chair at night at times, if you can handle that without dying or anything like that, and then maybe you can think of some solutions in case this does happen, which sometimes it will. Can you handle it? Next slide, please. And building those relationships, I can't say that enough. We need to learn how to build those relationships and learn how to work with different personalities. We all think that we're going to get together in these groups when they're all very organized. Like right now we have an organized setting going with this Zoom, but when you get into rooms of people, you still have an organized setting. You get outside of those settings, and people have different personalities. All of a sudden they become themselves, and they're thinking, well, I'm not going to do that for her. And somebody else says, oh, but, you know, and somebody might really shy away from that, saying, oh, okay. You know, well, you got to learn how to work with these relationships and learn to understand the relationships. One of my favorite sayings is, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And if you're a good listener, you'll learn to be able to do that. Give yourself some thinking time, build those coalitions, try to understand those different personalities. One of the really good activities that I like, and there are a lot of them, by the way, but there's one called Colors. Colors is a great one that I did when Alexa was in early intervention and I was on the state ICC. We did one with all of the professionals and the local ICCs so that the families and professionals could get to learn each other's personalities. So we could try to figure out, why were we fighting with each other? And, oh, you know, I know you now as a person, and I know the funny side of you. And it really helps when you're working together trying to do problem solving. Next, please. And my last slide here is to constantly picture the child in the future living a happy and fulfilling life in the community of their choice, with the people they choose, and with needed supports and services. And of course, we have a great example sitting right here. And I'm so proud of her because she's gone beyond my expectations. Sometimes as I was going through this in life, I think, oh, I hope I'm doing the right thing. I was always second guessing myself. Oh, I hope this is the right thing. And now I look at her and she's beyond my expectations. And I think, it worked. It was worth it. It was worth every single minute. And if any of you ever want any assistance, you know, with gathering with families or whatever, and learning how to get this process started with young families, I'd be more than happy to assist. So just give me a call. Alexa, is there any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, well, I thank you very much. And I'm going to give you back to Mark to do a couple of follow-ups.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We want to thank both of you. This has just been extraordinary, and we really appreciate all that you have given us and to think about and to share. We will share, Kathy's agreed, we'll share the slides, we'll send out to you. They'll also be on the department's website, and the handout that we did earlier. We'll send Alexa and Kathy's email to you if you want to follow up with them at all. There was one question, Kathy, I want to come back with you of, I thought was really important, and we just have a few minutes, but nonetheless, it really asked, how do you overcome setting services just for yourself or your child or your loved one, and other people are left out? And I wondered, there were a bunch of answers that we had, but I wondered if, Kathy, if you might be able to respond to that a little bit.
I'm not sure if you mean, are you talking about Which
Right.
services?
Like, I think they're talking about, like, when I graduated high school, they unfortunately
Oh,
threw away the bus. And
It's about outdated.
how do we keep that from happening?
yes. So if we're getting it the right way, the school bus became very much in demand.
Let me interrupt, Kathy. I wanted to generalize because that's what people are
Okay.
after. It's the issue of how do you, and I've heard this a lot and I have the problem. If you're a strong advocate and you get something for the person you're caring about, be it your loved one or your best friend, how do you deal with the fact that other people then they often don't get that?
Well, I do think that that's a really sad state, and it does happen. There is no way that you're going to be able to take everyone with you, but the best thing that you can do is what we're doing really is to teach others to figure out, how can you make that happen for you as well. And it's basically through education. I haven't learned any secret weapon, unfortunately. I've tried many times, like even with the bus, we thought it was going to continue on. Once she graduated, it got junked. And even though it was in huge demand for field trips and everything like that, and there were one or two others that got their own regular buses, but there's nothing that we can say that will make it happen.
Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate that.
Heartbreaking.
We don't expect magic answers to all that, but I just thought the question was so important that I wanted to put it on the table. Thank you for the people who gave answers in the chat box we have. In a few minutes we have it left, just the next steps. Next week we have a fabulous and awesome presentation, just as we had with Kathy and Alexa. Pearl Barnett is a national figure in older adults and person-centered planning. She's with the center, the National Center on Older Adults called Advancing Stages, and is involved in many consulting with many states, and she'll be with us actually in 2 weeks because next week is Veterans Day. Anybody else that's signed up, you can sign up on the department's website. We strongly encourage people to come, and David and I were just preparing with her yesterday, and she's quite extraordinary and really answers the question. And a lot of people, just like with children, a lot of people ask themselves, this is fine, but how does this help older adults? How do we help older adults hold on to as much decision-making as they can? We know my mother lived with us till she was 90, and she was always trying to hold on to being able to be the decision maker. And that's where person-centered planning can help. We invite you to join us. Future topics are Michael Kendrick on supported decision-making, who is extraordinary and has done this in 4 different states. Ruthie Beckwith talking about employment. And then finally, self-advocates helping people lead their own meeting, that we'll be talking about. We also have person-centered planning champions that we invite you to if you're really committed to pursuing and increasing and enhancing person-centered planning in Nebraska. Our next meeting is Tuesday, November 9th. Anybody wants to join the person-centered planning champions or that meeting, just put your name in the chat box, just like champions, and put your email right there. We have success stories that Mary Angus, who's been our co-host, is working on. There's 2 of them up on the department's website, and we've been trying to find more. So any of you who want to be a success story, we'll write it, we'll do it, we'll do all the work. Just help us. We have 10 webinars that are all recorded and up on the department's website. And David Weatherow has been with us today, has done one, but we strongly recommend those to you. These are people who have done person-centered planning. Most of them have done training in Nebraska, and most of them have written the books and the articles and have done the work of creating all of this. And we strongly recommend them to you. Also, the Facebook page that we would love for you to join. And with that, anybody who wants to get the chat box, there's 3 dots you can click and get it yourself. And finally, we have a Survey Monkey that Ann's going to put in the chat box, and we would greatly appreciate it if you would go to it and fill that out. It just takes 4 minutes. And both Nebraska Duty Council, our funder, wants to know the state and also the federal funds. And if you can believe it, the people watching you want to know your perceptions and thoughts of how well we're doing. With all of that, I'm going to bring us to a close. I'm going to express our great appreciation to Kathy and Alexa. Thank you for being with us. We hope you'll be with us in 2 weeks. And on behalf of both myself, David Weatherow, Ruthie Beckwith, Mary Angus, and Jennifer James, and Formeller, and also Sam, our interpreter today, we thank you for being with us. We wish you a good day, and we hope we see you in 2 weeks. Thank you all. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.